He sat in his car for almost 10 minutes before going inside, fingers tight around the steering wheel, staring at the warm lights of the small Italian cafe across the street. The message was still open on his phone. The transfer notification had already come through. Enough money to cover his daughter's school fees for 3 months. Enough to fix the leak in the roof he'd been patching with plastic sheets. Enough to breathe again, at least for a while. All he had to do was play a role for one evening. Act bored, say a few cutting things, make the date uncomfortable so she'd leave early. No shouting, no scenes, just subtle humiliation. That was the instruction. He told himself it wasn't personal. He didn't even know her. He was just a single dad doing what single dads sometimes did, making compromises he hated for the sake of survival. Mark adjusted his worn jacket, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and forced a crooked smile. 1 hour, he muttered. Then I'm out. He got out of the car and walked toward the cafe, rehearsing lines in his head that sounded casual but dismissive. He hated that part the most. He used to be better than this. Before his wife died. Before hospital bills and daycare costs and sleepless nights hollowed him out. Before desperation started whispering that dignity was a luxury. Inside, the cafe smelled of coffee and garlic and fresh bread. Soft music played. Couples leaned toward each other, laughing quietly. He scanned the room, already knowing who she was before he reached the table. She was sitting straight back near the window, hands folded neatly on the table, eyes focused on the door. She was much smaller than everyone else around her, her feet not quite touching the floor of the chair. A dwarf woman, maybe late 20s or early 30s, wearing a deep blue dress and a cream-colored cardigan. Her hair was carefully styled, makeup subtle but deliberate. She looked composed, not nervous, just alert. For a moment, something uncomfortable twisted in his chest. He pushed it down and walked over. "Lena?" he asked. She looked up and smiled. It wasn't forced. It was warm and genuine, like she'd been looking forward to this. "Mark, hi, yes, nice to finally meet you." Her voice was calm, confident, not apologetic. That threw him off just a little. "Yeah, nice," he said, pulling out the chair opposite her and sitting down. He glanced briefly at her height, then deliberately leaned back, crossing his arms, already starting the act. "So you look shorter than I expected." There it was. The first jab. He watched for the reaction he'd been told to provoke. Embarrassment, discomfort, anger. Instead, she nodded slightly. "That happens. Online photos can be tricky. I did mention my height in my profile, though." Her eyes didn't drop. She didn't shrink away. She just stated it like a fact. He cleared his throat, annoyed that it hadn't landed. "Right, I guess I just didn't think it would be that noticeable." She smiled again, softer this time. "Most people do notice." "It's okay." A waiter came by and she ordered sparkling water. Mark ordered a beer he didn't really want. He was supposed to escalate slowly. That was the plan. Make her feel small without outright cruelty. The idea made his stomach turn, but he reminded himself of the money. Of his daughter Ellie, asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. "So," he said, glancing around the cafe instead of at her, "what do you do for work?" "I'm a graphic designer," Lena replied. "I mostly work with nonprofits and small businesses. I like projects with meaning." "Huh." He took a sip of beer. "Must be hard being, in that field. Clients taking you seriously." She tilted her head slightly. "Why wouldn't they?" He shrugged. "People judge. It's just reality." "Yes," she said evenly. "They do." There was no bitterness in her voice. No defensiveness. Just acknowledgement. It unsettled him more than anger would have. He tried again. "I mean, dating must be tough too. I can't imagine many guys sign up for this kind of situation." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she picked up her glass, took a small sip, then set it down carefully. "Some don't," she said, "some do. And some think they're doing me a favor just by showing up." The words landed closer to home than he liked. He shifted in his chair. "I agreed to this date because I thought you seemed interesting," she continued. "And because blind dates are always a bit of a gamble. I've had wonderful ones. I've had terrible ones. Either way, I show up as myself." He laughed, a little too loudly. "Brave." "Not really," she replied. "Just honest." The waiter brought their drinks. Mark noticed how politely she thanked him, how she met his eyes without hesitation. The script in his head started to unravel. He was supposed to control this, steer it toward discomfort. Instead, he felt like he was the one being quietly examined. "So," she said, "tell me about you. Your profile mentioned you're a father." He hesitated. He hadn't planned on talking about Ellie. That wasn't part of the job. "Yeah, single dad. My wife passed away 4 years ago." "I'm sorry," Lena said immediately. And this time her expression changed, softened, deepened. "That must have been incredibly hard." He shrugged, defensive again. "You deal with it." "She must be proud of you," Lena said. That did it. Something in his chest cracked open just a little. He looked away, jaw tight. "You don't know that." "No," she agreed. "I don't, but I know what it looks like when someone keeps going even when it hurts." Silence stretched between them. The cafe noise faded into the background. Mark felt a flicker of shame. This wasn't going the way he'd expected. He needed to regain control. "So," he said, forcing a smirk, "do you ever wish you were normal?" The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't look down. She leaned back slightly in her chair, folded her hands again and looked at him steadily. "No," she said. "Do you?" He blinked. "What? Do you ever wish you were normal?" She repeated. "Widowed, struggling, doing things you're not proud of to get by. Does that feel normal to you?" His face flushed. His mouth opened, then closed again. He felt exposed, like she could see straight through him, past the sarcasm in the act. "You're hurting," she continued quietly. "I don't know why you're saying these things, but I can guess. People don't mock others when they're at peace." He swallowed hard. He hadn't expected this. No one had spoken to him like this in years. Not with pity. Not with anger. With clarity. "You know," she went on, "I agreed to this date knowing there was a chance you'd be disappointed. Or awkward. Or even cruel. That's part of my reality. But I still show up. Because my dignity doesn't depend on how someone else treats me." The words hit him harder than any insult could have. He felt the weight of the envelope of money in his pocket like a stone. "I'm not ashamed of who I am," Lena said. "I'm not broken. I'm not a joke. I'm a woman who deserves respect, whether or not you choose to give it." Around them, the cafe seemed to hold its breath. A couple at the next table had gone quiet, pretending not to listen while listening anyway. Mark's hands trembled slightly. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Not her height. Not the difference. Her strength, her calm, her unwavering sense of self. "I was paid," he blurted out. The words fell out of him before he could stop them. She didn't react immediately. Her eyebrows lifted just a fraction. "Paid? To mess this up," he said hoarsely. "Someone paid me to come here and make you uncomfortable. To mock you. I needed the money. I didn't think," his voice broke, "I didn't think you'd be like this." The truth sat between them, raw and ugly. Lena took a slow breath. She nodded once. "Thank you for telling me." "You're not angry?" he asked, incredulous. "I am," she said honestly. "But I'm also not surprised. This wouldn't be the first time someone tried to turn me into a lesson or a punchline." He looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry." "I know," she said. "And I believe you." He looked up sharply. "You do?" "Yes," she said. "Because you stopped." He frowned. "Stopped what?" "Trying to hurt me," she replied. "You stopped when you realized I'm a person." Tears burned in his eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. He blinked them back, embarrassed. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "I'm not forgiving you," Lena said gently. "I'm choosing not to let you define me." She reached for her bag and stood up. Mark panicked for a moment, thinking she was leaving. "I'm going home," she said. "Not because you ruined the date, but because I've learned what I needed to learn." He stood too, clumsy and unsure. "Which is?" "That my dignity is intact," she said. "And that sometimes even broken people can choose to do better." She hesitated, then added, "You should keep the money. Use it for your daughter. But don't let it turn you into someone she wouldn't recognize." With that, she walked toward the door, head held high, step steady. Conversations resumed slowly around them, but Mark barely heard them. He stood there, stunned, watching the door swing closed behind her. He sat back down heavily, the chair scraping against the floor. His beer was untouched. He didn't want it anymore. He pulled out his phone and looked at the transfer notification again. The numbers hadn't changed, but something else had. For the first time in years, he felt something close to resolve. That night, when he tucked Ellie into bed, she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Did you have a good day, Daddy?" He hesitated, then smiled softly. "I learned something important," he said. She yawned. "Like what?" "That being kind is always worth more than money," he said. She smiled sleepily, already drifting off. Weeks later, Mark would quit the side jobs that chipped away at his soul. It would be hard. Harder than before, maybe. But every time he doubted himself, he would remember a woman in a blue dress who refused to be humiliated, who met cruelty with dignity, and who changed everything without raising her voice. And somewhere across town, Lena would continue to show up for her life exactly as she was, unapologetic, unbroken, and fully aware of her worth.